in this problem, I'm going to do, in this video, I'm going to do number 6 in chapter 4 of Krugman and Wells Microeconomics. This is page 127. So this problem, this is the first time that you are seeing multiple quantities demanded at different prices. So we've been doing problems where we have, an addition of one more quantity demanded for, say, a decrease in price. And now we are starting to see more than one increase. So for instance, we go from, if you look at the bottom of this table, so if you just look at these two numbers here, we go from having no one demanding the book at the price of $110 to 2 people demanding at the price of $105. So this is going to require a few more steps than we have been doing, and so I'm going to walk you through those steps. I think it's most intuitive to start with actually doing this graphically and then looking at it algebraically so that we can compare the algebra to what we've already done graphically. So you can see that I've set up my axes with price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. I've truncated my y-axis, which is denoted with these 2 slashes down by the origin, just because it wouldn't really make sense for me to make marks for 0 to 55 to only then go up by increments of 5. So I just truncated it and started at 55 to make it easier for us to plot. So I'm going to go ahead and now start. I really actually just want to focus on my quantity demanded. So I'm actually just going to, let's see if I can do this. I'm actually just going to, okay, there we go. So I just wanted to get rid of our quantity supplied for right now and just think about quantity demanded. So now I'm going to go ahead and try and graph the information I have for the different willingnesses to pay at these different prices. Now, the way that the table is set up is a little backwards for our plotting. I think it's more intuitive to start with the quantity at lower levels. So I'm going to actually start with the bottom of this table where I have 0, nobody buying the book at the price of $110. So I'm going to go ahead and start plotting. So 0 at 110, and then I have 2 consumers at the price of 105. So I'm going to do this the way that we've been doing it with this rectangle method. And then I'm going to show you how this relates to our demand curve. So I have 2, the quantity demanded being at 2 for the price of 105. I'll now have the quantity demanded at 4 for the price of 100. So I'll go ahead and draw that. So about 4. This is not going to be perfect, but it should just give us some sense. Then I'm going to have 6 consumers demanding at the price of 95. Get over to 6. And so now that I have done the first few, I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest. Okay, so I've gone ahead and graphed, plotted bars for all of the information that we have in the table. Now, if you notice, for the first time now, we are starting to see bars that are not equal in width. And one of the things I want to point out to you is that, if I were to draw, if I drew a point at the top right of each one of these bars, it would correspond to the point in the table, as if I were to just sort of plot the coordinates in the first quadrant. And when I connect these dots, I hope I can do it without botching it too much. Ooh, okay, so what you should see now is the development of our downward sloping demand curve, and a real actual, non-linear curve. reflecting the idea that as our price decreases, we get more and more and more consumers coming into the market willing to pay for an item. This is the reflection of our law of demand, that these bars are getting greater in their width. The lower the price reflects our law of demand. We're getting more people per decrease in the price than before. Now, if I were to take the extra leap and assume that you could consume infinitely small increments of the book at infinitely small increments of the price, then I would get this smooth curve that I have drawn connecting these dots. Now, that's a big assumption, and as I explained in class, we make that assumption because as you can see, with the more and more quantities demanded that we have, it becomes somewhat tedious to have to calculate the area above each one of these bars in order to get a notion of consumer surplus. And so as we have more quantity, however, we have this convenient fact that the area of these bars approximates the area under this curve. So we use the area under the curve to approximate the area under the bars, just for our convenience. So we're going to take a step back and kind of just not consider that anymore and just stick with our bars for right now, but just know that that's kind of how we're able to move ahead from these bars to that smooth curve. So now let's take a look at the price that's set in this market. Well, they tell us to consider equilibrium. Equilibrium, by definition, is a place where our quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So if I bring back my quantity supplied column, then I can see that the equilibrium price is at $85. It's the price where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So let's just take that away again just to avoid any confusion. But we now know that the equilibrium price is $85, and that's going to be the price that's set in the market. So now let's draw that price. So that is right here. That's the equilibrium price. And now we want to calculate the consumer surplus, okay? Well, we know how to do that. The consumer surplus is going to be the difference in the consumer's willingness to pay minus what they actually paid. So it's going to end up being, I can draw it just like that. The area of the bars, let's see if I can. Hold on. Okay, the area of the bars in those spaces there in the blue. So, I'm just going to go down the line and calculate this out. In the first bar, I have a height of 20 and a width of 2. So I have a area of 40. Can I please write this? Okay. In the second bar, it looks like I have a height of 15. I span from 85. So this bar represents a willingness to pay of 100 and actually paid $85. So a height of 15, and again a width of 2, and so the area in this bar is going to be 30. Then in the third bar, shaded area of the bar, I'm going to have a willingness to pay of 95 but actually paid 85. And so that height there is 10, and then the width of that bar is 2, so for an area of 20. And then in the third bar, I have a willingness to pay of 90, only paid 85, so height of 5, and then again a width of 2, so I have an area of 10. So adding all of those areas together, I have a total consumer surplus of $100. Okay, so now I'm going to use that picture, I've shrunk it a bit, to calculate the consumer surplus algebraically. And I'm doing it this way because I think doing it graphically is much more intuitive than doing it algebraically. And I can use the graph to show you how the algebra links up. So first of all, let's consider this quantity demanded. Now I need to have you at this point kind of think about not the total quantity demanded at each price, but how many more buyers come to the market as the price drops. Because that's going to give us the width of the rectangles. So notice that, I don't have one rectangle, so consider this first sort of, let me be able to write this. Notice that, say at this price and quantity demanded, I don't have one rectangle that, has a width of 50. Rather, I have, where that point is represented, is the difference between the point before it and the demand that increased as a result of the price drop. So before we had 35 that were demanding at 60. And then we had 15 more that were demanding when the price dropped to 55. It's that 15 more that and more in general, how many more were brought to the market as the price drops, that I'm going to need to calculate the area algebraically. So what I'm going to do is actually move this column over a bit, and now I'm going to calculate on this empty space here on the right. I'm just going to put how many more come to the market as a result of the price dropping. Now you remember from doing this graphically, I started where quantity demanded was 0 and I worked my way up quantity, and I'm going to do that again because again I think it's more intuitive. So we start at 0. Then we see that when the price drops from $110 to $105, we have 2 more people come to the market. Now, where is that represented in our graph? It's represented in the first width, or the width of the first bar right here. Okay. Then we go to the price again drops to 100, and we have 2 more people come to the market. Again, that is represented now in the width of our bar here. Then we have the price drops again to 95, and we have 2 more people come in. 2 more people come in. 2 more people come in. 2 more. 2 more. Now we have 3 more. Now, where is this represented? This is represented in this first bar that starts to get a little bit wider. Okay? Then we have 8 more come in. So that's represented now in this second bar that gets even more wide. Actually, I think I need to move down 1. So let me just do that. So this was the first increase. This was plus 3. Then this was the second, the plus 8. Then we have that from when the price of the book drops from 65 to 60, we go from 25 consumers to 35. So we see an increase in 10. And so let me draw that there. And then we see an increase in 15 consumers coming to the market when the price drops to 55. So plus 15. Okay, so that's where we get those numbers from. Those are the widths of the rectangles corresponding to our graphical calculation. Okay, and now let me make a new column and make this column for what was actually paid for this book. Now we know it's the equilibrium price of $85. So 85 down the line was actually paid. And where is this represented in our graph? Well, I'll circle this in sort of this purple color to show you that it corresponds to this line right here. That's the line of what was actually paid. So now I'll make a new column, and this is where I'm going to calculate the consumer surplus. The difference between what consumers were willing to pay, okay, which is also just this price of the book, and is also the height of these rectangles here. So willingness to pay minus what they actually paid, that purple line right there. Well, we know that until we get to a willingness to pay of 85, no one is buying. So no one is buying until we get to the willingness to pay of $85, which ends up being here. And here we just have that the willingness to pay is actually the same exact thing as the ability to pay, and so it's 0. And so what we've actually done is just started from here and moved all the way to the left until we got to the bar, and then we hit, okay, 0 consumer surplus. Now we say, okay, let's start at at a willingness to pay of 90. If you've actually paid 85, then you have a consumer surplus of $5, but there are 2 people who came to the market who were willing to pay 90 that only paid 85, and so you have 2 people who for whom the market generated a consumer surplus of $5, and so the total surplus for them is 10. So I'm just going to put in parentheses here 5 times 2. Now, where can we see this on the graph? Well, it's in the first bar here. We had two individuals come to the market, that's represented by the width of the bar, who were willing to pay 90, where it's represented by the top of that bar, but only ended up paying 85, where that purple line is. Now moving on to the next group of consumers who were willing to pay 95, but actually only ended up paying 85, and there are 2 of them. Okay, so I'm getting this number from right here, 2 of them. And so those 2 were willing to pay 95, ended up paying 85, and so each one of them, the market generated a consumer surplus of 10. And so we have both of them, the market generated 10, so times 2, we get 20. So I'll just put in parentheses here, 10 times 2. That corresponds to our next bar there, where you have the area under the bar, but above the line is 20. If you look at the third, now you have 2 people who were willing to pay 100, but who got the books for 85. So each of them, the market generated a consumer surplus of 15. There were 2 of them, and so their total is 30, and I'll just put 15 times 2. And then finally you have 2 individuals who were willing to pay 105 for this book, but ended up paying 85, and so for each one of them, the market generated a consumer surplus of 20. So there's 2, and so the consumer surplus that was generated at a willingness to pay of 105 is actually 40, and I'll just put in parentheses 20 times 2. Now for the last one, notice you have no one actually willing to pay 110. And so there is really no consumer surplus generated there because no one actually was willing to pay 110. Where is that represented? Well, that's represented at on the y-axis there, at the point 0, 110. And so algebraically now we can think about the total surplus that was generated in this market at the equilibrium price of $85 per book, and that's just going to be all the surpluses that were generated, 10 plus 20 plus 30 plus 40, which gives us our original answer that we calculated graphically, ooh, no, not $500, $100